It wasn't just a thriller about a heist gone wrong. Ronin was a quiet descent into loyalty lost, orders forgotten, and missions no longer backed by anything but instinct. It arrived with no fanfare, no agenda, just steel, silence, and suspicion. While Hollywood in the late 90s was busy inflating explosions and chasing digital effects, Ronin took the opposite route. Raw, analog, and entirely disinterested in spectacle. John Frankenheimer, a director obsessed with moral disarray and fractured identity, crafted a film that felt like espionage without ideology. He cast Robert De Niro and Jean Reno not to play heroes but to wear silence like armor. The rest of the cast, ghosts in motion, each concealing more than they revealed. The script offered no exposition. Motivation came in fragments. Scenes changed mid-shoot. Dialogue tightened to near invisibility. And behind it all loomed a mysterious briefcase central to the story, yet never opened, never explained. Its purpose? Unknown. Perhaps even irrelevant. What mattered was the weight of uncertainty. Every character in Ronin walks like they're stepping into a trap, even when they're setting it. There's no patriotic speech, no climactic redemption, just professionals doing what they know best, moving forward because stopping would mean looking back. Decades later, Ronin still lingers in the cinematic bloodstream, not as a product of its time, but as a challenge to it. A story told in shadows, a world where trust is currency, and every handshake might be a setup. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Ronin. 1998. Fact 1. A briefcase that refused to tell its story. It sat at the center of every scene, chased, stolen, bartered, protected. And yet, the briefcase in Ronin was never opened. Its contents never revealed, not to the audience, not to the characters, not even to the actors portraying them. Director John Frankenheimer was clear. The briefcase existed only to set everything in motion. It wasn't a symbol, it wasn't a message, it was movement disguised as meaning. Speculation bloomed for decades. Secret weapons, money, intelligence documents, nuclear material. But all of it was noise. Even the actors stopped asking what was inside. The truth was simpler and more disturbing. No one knew, because it didn't matter. The briefcase was a perfect void, a narrative shell that drew violence, loyalty, and betrayal into its orbit. It meant nothing. And that nothingness exposed how desperate these characters were to have a cause, any cause to cling to. In a world full of former agents with no mission left, it was the illusion of purpose that kept them moving. That's why the briefcase had to remain closed. Once opened, it would have revealed the truth they couldn't bear. There was never anything to fight for. Fact 2. De Niro treated every bullet like a real threat. For Robert De Niro, playing a former CIA operative wasn't about style, it was about discipline. Before filming began, he consulted with intelligence experts, practiced tactical maneuvers, and rehearsed with live weapons until every movement became second nature. He wasn't interested in looking cool. He wanted to look correct. During one key scene, a stunt coordinator asked him to fire around a corner without looking. De Niro pushed back. "You don't shoot blind," he said. "You reposition or you don't shoot at all." Frankenheimer agreed and restructured the scene around De Niro's feedback. His attention to detail extended to the smallest motions, trigger discipline, body position, scanning rooms. Nothing was left to improvisation. Even in driving scenes, he demanded real motion, refusing to fake reactions or mimic inertia. As a result, Sam, the character, never feels like a movie mercenary. He feels lived in, precise, efficient, the kind of professional who calculates everything, down to how much noise a misstep might make. De Niro wasn't pretending to be a spy. He was acting like someone who no longer had to pretend. Fact 3. Withholding the truth was part of the method. The paranoia in Ronin didn't come solely from the script, it came from the way it was filmed. Frankenheimer deliberately kept the actors in the dark. Plot twists were withheld. Character motivations shifted mid-shoot. Entire scenes were rewritten without warning. Stellan Skarsgård believed his character, Gregor, was a trustworthy expert until late in production, when a sudden rewrite turned him into a manipulative traitor. Natasha McElhone was never told how much Deirdre was manipulating others or being manipulated herself. This lack of clarity wasn't just tolerated, it was engineered. Frankenheimer wanted the actors to mistrust the story and, by extension, each other. He believed that real suspicion couldn't be fake. It shows. The performances are guarded, full of hesitation. Characters don't just hide things from each other, they seem unsure of their own roles. Every line has weight, every glance, a question. The audience doesn't get answers because the cast didn't either. And in a film about shadows, that's the most honest trick of all. Fact 4. The chaos was real, and so were the streets. You've seen them, those heart-stopping car chases tearing through Parisian traffic, engines howling, metal scraping inches from stone walls. But here's what made them unforgettable. None of it was artificial. There were no visual effects, no digital touch-ups. Every frame was real. Frankenheimer demanded it. A former racing enthusiast himself, he didn't trust post-production illusions. So the production unleashed over 300 trained drivers across real roads, many of which remained partially open to the public during filming. That meant unpredictability, real pedestrians, unexpected cars, spontaneous tension. To maintain authenticity, some vehicles were modified with dual controls, allowing hidden drivers to steer from unusual positions while actors sat behind the wheel. And then there was the pacing. No undercranking, no editing cheats. Every swerve, stall, and near collision happened in camera. One sequence involving a car reversing through a crowded market was shot with split-second timing and minimal rehearsal. It worked. Barely. The result is more than adrenaline. It's presence. You don't watch the chase, you're inside it. And in a genre flooded with CGI chaos, Ronin stands apart by grounding danger in the real world, at full speed. Fact 5. A Pulitzer winner walked away from the credit. David Mamet, known for his razor-wire dialogue and bleak moral landscapes, was brought in to rewrite Ronin. He overhauled the structure, sharpened the conversations, and infused the film with ambiguity. But when it came time for credit, the Writers Guild ruled that his contribution would be shared. Mamet refused. Instead of accepting partial credit, he removed his name entirely and replaced it with the pseudonym Richard Weiss. He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. Frankenheimer acknowledged that Mamet's influence was foundational. The terse exchanges, the ethical gray zones, the sparse yet loaded language, all of it bore Mamet's DNA. He created a script that didn't explain itself. It dared the audience to keep up. Ironically, that anonymity mirrored the film itself. Just like the characters on screen, Mamet worked behind the curtain, changed everything, and disappeared without leaving a name. Sometimes, the most essential hand is the one that never signs the paper. Fact 6. The title defines everything without explaining anything. Ronin. A single word, never defined, never addressed. No character utters it, no narrator explains it. And yet, it sits like a ghost over every frame of the film. Historically, a Ronin was a samurai without a master, an exiled warrior stripped of purpose. Frankenheimer chose the term deliberately, but refused to have the film explain it. He wanted the audience to feel its weight, not be handed a definition. And so, the characters move like Ronin, skilled, disciplined, but directionless. They serve no nation, no ideology, no clear agenda, just contracts, habits, instinct. Sam is the clearest example. He carries himself with quiet control, but never reveals his full past. Vincent, too, exudes loyalty, but to what or to whom is never stated. Their choices are shaped by something older than the mission at hand. By refusing to define the title, the film forces you to reconsider what you've watched. It isn't a spy thriller. It's a story about mercenaries adrift, still clinging to codes that no longer apply. And in that silence, the word Ronin speaks louder than any exposition could. Fact 7. Jean Reno used language as a wall. On set, Jean Reno made an unusual choice. Though fluent in English, he spoke almost exclusively in French throughout production. It wasn't out of discomfort, it was intentional. Reno believed that Vincent, his character, operated on a different emotional frequency than the others. He wanted to keep that distance alive, both on screen and off. By avoiding English off-camera, he maintained a layer of remove that subtly carried into his performance. It worked. In the film, Vincent seems detached but grounded, observant but never fully aligned. The rapport between him and Sam isn't built on camaraderie, it's built on mutual professionalism and unspoken trust. That tension between involvement and distance wasn't just acting, it was cultivated. Reno rarely joked between takes, stayed in character's posture even off-duty, and responded to instructions via translator even when he didn't need one. It wasn't method, it was structure. He built a psychological perimeter around Vincent, and it held through every scene. Because in a story where alliances are fluid, being apart was the only way to stay centered. Fact 8. The sniper scene was a quiet invention of horror. The moment is short. A sniper on a bell tower, scanning a crowd through a rifle scope. His crosshairs linger on pigeons, then people, then pigeons again. No one speaks, no shots are fired, and it was never in the original screenplay. Frankenheimer added it mid-shoot, inspired by a wartime story about snipers using birds for practice before targeting civilians. He wanted to capture that sense of waiting, of quiet violence, of dread with no release. The production had a set built in days. A stuntman was placed on the tower. Pigeons untrained were released. The result? Organic chaos. Wings flapping, scope drifting, the threat of action hanging over stillness like a knife. No one in the scene reacts because nothing happens. But something almost did, and that tension suspended and unspoken adds a new layer to the film. It reframes the violence in Ronin, not as action, but as profession. And when killing becomes routine, the real horror lives in the pause before the trigger. Fact 9. The film's sequence was chosen by instinct, not design. Most films are shot out of order, interior scenes first, locations grouped by cost, climaxes saved for the end. But Ronin broke that rule. Frankenheimer insisted on filming much of the movie chronologically. The reason? The script was a moving target. Rewrites were constant. Motivations evolved. Scenes were restructured midweek. By shooting in order, Frankenheimer could adapt tone, performance, and narrative flow on the fly without worrying about continuity gaps. The cast felt the shift. Early scenes were tight, rehearsed, confident. Later scenes grew looser, more fatigued, filled with tension that wasn't always scripted. It mirrored the story perfectly. De Niro later remarked that by the time they reached the cafe scenes near the end, the exhaustion wasn't performance, it was real. The characters weren't just unraveling, the actors were too. That fatigue became texture. It bled into the pacing, into the silences, into the eyes. Sometimes, control doesn't come from planning. It comes from letting chaos build until the performance doesn't need directing anymore. Fact 10. The best dialogue was born on the spot. Some of the most iconic lines in Ronin weren't written in advance. They were discovered during filming, crafted through instinct, logic, and quiet rebellion. Frankenheimer encouraged it. De Niro insisted on it. The goal was clarity through minimalism. Take the now famous line, "Whenever there's any doubt, there is no doubt." It wasn't in the script. It came from a real intelligence officer Frankenheimer once spoke to. De Niro heard it, paused, and said, "We're using that." And they did. Scenes were often revised minutes before the take. Dialogue was stripped of flair, restructured into something leaner. Frankenheimer called it functional silence, where what's not said tells the story. There were no quippy one-liners, no exposition dumps. Just statements measured, deliberate, and sharpened like tools. That restraint made the dialogue feel real. These weren't actors trading lines. They were professionals, communicating with the economy of people who knew too much to say more. In a film where trust is currency, the words had to earn their way in. And many of them arrived late, but landed hard. Fact 11. McElhone was given no map through the role. Natasha McElhone's character, Deirdre, is hard to read by design. Is she manipulating the team? Is she being used? Is she loyal to the cause, or just surviving the fallout? The ambiguity isn't just written into the script, it was lived on set. Frankenheimer gave McElhone minimal background. She was told different things at different points, sometimes directly contradicting previous instructions. The goal was to keep her on edge, to prevent any clean sense of control. Her reactions, then, are full of doubt, hesitations, shifts in posture, lines delivered with two possible meanings. Even her accent fluctuates slightly, scene to scene, a subconscious echo of a character hiding her real identity in plain sight. The performance feels like someone navigating a maze with no map. And that's exactly how it was built. McElhone later admitted that she didn't fully understand Deirdre's arc until the shoot was nearly over, and that confusion became fuel, because in Ronin, certainty is the one thing no one can afford to show. Fact 12. Real operatives stood just outside the frame. Look closely at the backgrounds in Ronin, the silent figures leaning on lampposts, the unreadable drivers, the anonymous men seated 2 tables away. Many weren't extras. They were former intelligence agents brought in to add texture, but told to remain invisible. Frankenheimer wanted authenticity in every layer. He believed that real operatives carried themselves differently. They scanned rooms without being obvious, held their posture with purpose, entered and exited spaces without drawing attention. So he brought them in not to speak, but to fill in the negative space. Their presence added weight, their stillness created tension, and sometimes their corrections even changed how scenes were shot. One operative reportedly coached Jean Reno on how to clear a room silently. Another told a crew member that a handoff scene looked too clean, prompting a reblock. These contributions were never credited. They were shadows among shadows, watching from the edges, just as they had in real life. And in a story where you're never sure who's watching, they were. Fact 13. The ice rink was a last-minute detour into unease. The shootout at the ice rink feels surreal, children skating, a hush of cold air, and then gunfire. But that scene wasn't in the original shooting script. The action was meant to unfold in a cramped alleyway. Conventional, forgettable. Frankenheimer rejected it. He wanted discomfort. He wanted contrast. He wanted the violence to feel like it didn't belong, and that meant placing it in a space where innocence thrived. So the alley became a rink. Bright, open, echoing. The logistics were a nightmare. Freezing temperatures fogged the lenses, movement was restricted, and the child extras, many unaware of the exact details, reacted with real alarm when blanks were fired. One even fell mid-skate during a take and burst into tears. Reno reportedly stayed in character, guiding the child off-set calmly. It wasn't in the script, but the camera kept rolling. The resulting scene is a tonal fracture. It feels out of place, but deliberately so. Because in Ronin, violence doesn't ask permission. It enters spaces it doesn't belong and leaves a stain that lingers. Fact 14. Sean Bean's fall was written as a warning. Spence enters Ronin with bravado, confident, assertive, eager to prove himself. He exits humiliated, discredited, and irrelevant. It feels abrupt. That's because it was rewritten to be exactly that. Sean Bean's character originally had a longer trajectory, including moments of redemption. But Frankenheimer wasn't interested in art. He was interested in hierarchy, and what happens when someone at the table doesn't belong. The scene where Sam exposes Spence's incompetence wasn't fully scripted. De Niro, pulling from tactical training, guided the moment naturally. Bean wasn't fully prepared for the shift in tone, and that vulnerability reads as raw. The message was clear. This world isn't kind to bluffers. You either know what you're doing, or you're shown the door. Quietly, brutally. Spence's exit wasn't a subplot, it was a boundary marker, a way to signal what kind of film this was going to be, one where weakness doesn't die dramatically, it's dismissed cold. Fact 15. A simple cafe scene became surveillance theater. There's a cafe scene in Ronin, quiet, observational, uneventful, but its simplicity is deceptive. Behind the camera, the scene was staged using real surveillance principles. Frankenheimer didn't use traditional blocking. He placed cameras in storefronts across the street, on rooftops, and in cars with long lenses. Extras were given no choreographed movements. The actors were told to sit, talk, and improvise subtle interactions. The audio was captured using concealed mics under tables and in clothing. At times, the background noise overwhelmed lines. Frankenheimer kept it anyway. He wanted the moment to feel overheard, not performed. The result is a scene that doesn't feel staged. It feels recorded. There's a voyeuristic tension baked into every frame. You're not watching characters interact. You're watching someone watch them. It flips the entire dynamic. Instead of feeling inside the story, the viewer becomes part of the quiet surveillance, complicit, distant, and slightly unnerved. Fact 16. The reverse chase was pulled off by an invisible legend. One of Ronin's most jaw-dropping moments involves a car racing backward through the twisting chaos of Paris. The camera locks onto De Niro in the driver's seat, tense, focused, unfazed. But the person actually behind the wheel wasn't De Niro, and it wasn't a man. The sequence was executed by a French female rally driver, brought in for her unmatched skill at high-speed reverse driving. To preserve continuity, she was outfitted with a wig and De Niro's costume. The car was modified to allow her full control while staying hidden from view. She completed the sequence flawlessly in one take. Few fans know her name. She was never featured in behind-the-scenes footage, never interviewed, never formally credited. Her contribution exists only in movement, blur, precision. In a film where almost every character is hiding something, an allegiance, a motive, a memory, it feels right that one of the most brilliant performances was hidden behind a borrowed face and a steering wheel. Fact 17. The collapse heard only in rumors. During the late stages of production, tensions mounted, budget overages, scheduling delays, studio pressure. Then, one day, Frankenheimer collapsed on set. Crew members froze. Production halted. He returned 2 days later, quiet and composed. No formal explanation was ever given. Some said it was exhaustion. Others believed it was deliberate. There's a story shared quietly, never confirmed, that the director faked the episode to force the studio to back off. He knew how to manipulate optics. He understood timing, and he knew that a sick director invites hesitation. Whatever the truth, it worked. The studio loosened its grip. The final cut remained untouched, and Frankenheimer finished the film exactly how he wanted. In a movie defined by strategic moves and psychological bluffs, it wouldn't be surprising if the boldest tactic happened off camera, with no lights rolling, and no one quite sure what they just witnessed. Fact 18. The ending that refuses to end. The final scene doesn't offer closure. It offers retreat. Sam and Vincent meet one last time in a cafe. They speak softly. A few words exchanged. Then one of them leaves. No twist, no reveal. Just parting. That ambiguity was intentional. Frankenheimer rejected multiple alternate endings. One with Deirdre returning, another with betrayal, even one involving a final hit. None felt honest. He chose Kiet instead. De Niro and Reno shot the scene multiple ways. Hopeful, tense, suspicious. What made the cut was neutral, measured, tired. It's the kind of conclusion that doesn't satisfy, and that's the point. These aren't heroes riding into the sunset. They're ghosts resuming their patterns. When the credits roll, nothing is solved. Because the film was never about solving anything, it was about survival. And in Ronin, even endings are just another mission waiting to begin again. Off-screen, unspoken, already moving. Fact 19. The score was sculpted down to bare bones. Composer Elia Kamiral initially delivered a muscular score, full orchestration, tension-heavy rhythms, traditional action beats. Frankenheimer listened, then asked him to take almost all of it away. The directive was simple: don't lead the emotion, don't echo the gunshots, don't chase the scene. Instead, haunt it. Kamiral went back into the studio and began subtracting. String sections disappeared. Percussion was dialed down. At times, entire tracks were replaced with ambient tones, almost imperceptible. What emerged was a soundtrack that didn't command attention, but shadowed the film like a second presence. It breathed under dialogue. It withdrew during chaos. It only raised its voice when silence became too unbearable. The most telling cue happens during the final cafe scene. There's no crescendo, no catharsis, just the softest trace of music as Sam walks away. It's not there to move you. It's there to remind you that something moved and then vanished. Fact 20. The opening titles whisper the whole story. The film opens not with exposition or faces, but with texture. Darkness blooming into light, streaks like ink bleeding through paper, shapes forming, then fading. No cities, no name, no sound beyond breath and drift. Frankenheimer wanted the sequence to feel like memory, not images, but impressions. He referenced Japanese sumi-e painting, where space matters more than line, and what isn't shown carries more weight than what is. It's fitting. Ronin is about professionals defined by absence of masters, of nations, of clarity. The title sequence foreshadows that. It doesn't introduce characters, it introduces emptiness. The brushstroke aesthetic wasn't digital. It was built with layered film, grain overlays, and practical light manipulation. Every shift in texture was crafted by hand, and while viewers often skip or forget title sequences, this one sets the tone without speaking. It tells you everything by telling you nothing, because the world of Ronin doesn't announce itself. It drifts in like smoke, or ink, or something you should have seen coming. Bonus fact: Phantom Dogs was the film's secret identity. Behind the scenes, Ronin was rarely called Ronin. Among the crew, it went by another name, Phantom Dogs. It appeared on internal memos, transport manifests, even early production slates. At first glance, it sounded like a placeholder, just another code name to keep press and locals from asking questions. But the phrase stuck, and it meant more than just secrecy. Frankenheimer used it deliberately. He described the characters as trained predators who no longer remember what they were trained for. Dogs released from orders, moving on instinct, watching, reacting. Ghosts in motion. The cast began to adopt the term. Some even joked that they weren't playing characters, they were playing ghosts of soldiers who had nowhere left to return to. The phrase never made it into the script, the dialogue, or the credits, but it lingered behind every shot. And when you revisit Ronin knowing that, something shifts. The way Sam scans a room, the way Vincent never explains himself, the way everyone keeps moving, even when they don't know why. They're not just mercenaries, they're echoes. Phantom Dogs wasn't just a code name, it was the real name of the story. The one spoken in quiet between takes, and never once said aloud on screen. Because the deadliest stories don't announce themselves, they hide in plain sight and wait for you to give them a name. Which version of Ronin did you watch? The surface story of hired guns, or the quieter one about men chasing, meaning they can't define? Did the briefcase ever matter? Or was it just an excuse to keep moving? Tell us which fact reframed the film for you, and what hidden story you think still lies beneath the silence. And if there's another title you believe holds more than it shows, we're listening.